Greetings, my brothers and sisters. Sending gratitude to all of you who are joining in today to accompany us down the rabbit hole of self-exploration through plant medicines. My name is Ryan Sprague, and I'm here to tell you that your frequency is now set and tuned to explore psychedelic medicines and the impact they've made among the countless psychonauts exploring the last true frontier. Buy a ticket and take the ride with me as we get true first-hand accounts of the experiences, benefits, risks, and transformations taking place within the ever-expanding world of psychedelic medicines on This One Time on Psychedelics. Stepping her way onto the show to journey with us today is a woman who is a perfect representation of what can happen when we use plant medicines consciously to add substance and beauty to our lives. She is co-owner of Tahkole Biointegration, where she helps others reconstruct their reality through biointegration, is one of the founders and facilitators of the Intimately Tied Retreat, is one of the hosts of the Mentor in the Mirror podcast and the Psychedelic Space podcast, and last but definitely not least, is one of the founders of the Psychedelic Space program, which is designed to empower those interested in learning more about becoming facilitators for psychedelic medicines by connecting Western minds with ancient wisdom. So, without further ado, please help me in welcoming Kole Whitty to the show. What is up?
Hey, what's up, Ryan? So excited to be here for my favorite conversation. So,
yes,
wherever
same.
it goes and everywhere that it goes and nowhere that it goes, I'm stoked.
Same. And, we were chatting a little bit before the show about podcasting, and psychedelics and plant medicines, animal medicines have always been something that has fascinated me and something that has added a lot of substance and color to my life. And so when I started the other podcast, Highly Optimized, it was a subject that I would touch on with different guests. And a lot of people started asking me like, hey, it'd be really cool if you could jump further down that rabbit hole. And so I thought, well, what better place to do it than a podcast designed for it? So I started thinking, and I came up with This One Time on Psychedelics. So it's so good to have you here.
Yeah, it's good to be here. And I think that right now is the most exciting time in my lifetime for this conversation with where research is, third trials with MAPS right now. And then more people, honestly, with where mental health is, more people are exhausting options because they either can't get into a therapist, they can't find a good therapist, or they feel like they've exhausted Western medicine options. And between all the documentaries and lots of things I'm sure we'll talk about, people are looking for another way. So, it's almost like humanity coming full circle back to itself.
Absolutely. And, I see this as one of the good sides of like technology and social media and things like that, because it is helping to get the right information, the correct information, the science that is happening, the research that is happening out there into the world, and really reverse the stigma. I mean, with people like Michael Pollan, who was not, historically speaking, someone who would speak about psychedelics a lot, now, writing books on that. And, the tide is definitely turning. And especially where you are, you're in Austin, right?
Oh, yeah. Austin's turned into quite the epicenter of psychedelic psychonauts, explorers, optimized, obsessed entrepreneurs, contribution-based coaches. I mean, it's really a powerful and potent place to live.
Yeah.
And I landed here just in time.
That's so amazing. I went to Austin for my first time back in December. I'm not sure if you're familiar with I mean, you probably are, with Chris Marhefka and like the TCS crew, Training Camp for the Soul.
Oh, yes.
So I went to one of his retreats. He's a good buddy of mine, and I had a blast and loved the city. Hung out with my buddy Leo, who works for On It, and just had an absolute blast.
Mace Flow extraordinaire.
Yes. And he's actually, so dropping today is his episode on this podcast. I've had him on Highly Optimized before, and he showed up in full Eeyore costume and everything. I mean, he's the man. We have a lot of fun together.
Awesome.
Yeah. So Kole, I'd love if we could start out by hearing about your journey with psychedelics. Like, how did you first get into this subject, and what made you want to specialize in this area? Because I feel as though for many, I know plenty of people that are interested in the subject, but aren't so driven to specialize in it. So I'd love to hear the process of you getting to where you are today.
Sure. I mean, I'm going to synopsize it to the best of my ability, because I feel like each year of my life from like 8 to 25 is its own podcast episode. So I will summarize and do my best just to give more context than anything else, because most people that I know and that I work with in the psychedelic space got into it because they were looking for answers that they couldn't find anywhere else. And so that was similar for me. So I'm going to rewind to the fact that I had a lot of trauma and drama as a child from things outside of my family, as in my parents, my direct family. And then growing up Mormon in Utah, very conservative. My dad was a bishop, a lot of those common things that come up with parents kids whose parents were pastors or bishops or whatever. A lot of expectation, a lot of community issues. So the thing is, in the Mormon religion, you get baptized at 8 years old. The week after my 8th birthday, now I call it different. I used to call it molestation because of some therapy and things like that. I have since reframed it only because it was people not that much older than me. And so there's a different energy when it's not an adult. And so now I say it was assaults on my sexuality. And that's not even necessarily with there being a villain, just something that happened. But the internalization of that experience 1 week after my 8th birthday, and it went on for 4 years.
Wow.
What I saw in that moment is I was no longer perfect. I'm ruined. And so from that moment on, I had kind of given up. I was already going to hell in my cosmology, and I wouldn't be with my family and all these things. And what drove it deeper is when I was about 11 or so, maybe 12, I told my friend's sister what had happened. And she said, well, you're going to end up pregnant when you start having your period. Why? No one explained to me how sex actually works and that you can't actually get pregnant years later. Right.
Yes.
And so from about 12 to 14, I was living with all this fear, and I was considering on almost a daily basis, what am I going to tell the baby? What am I going to, you know what I mean? Like all this stuff. So I really lost my innocence at 8 years old. And I can call it that now. I certainly didn't call it that until some work in the psychedelic space. So by the time I hit my teens, I was pretty stereotypical at-risk youth, terrible grades, not going to school, obnoxious in class, not teachable, just a lot of anger, stuff like that going on. And so I ended up going to 3 different high schools, ended up going to a school for at-risk youth, dropped out of school, did summer schools, and ultimately dropped out my senior year. Moved out on my own because my parents got tired of me not coming home for days at a time. And my dad just said, look, I love you. I can't keep doing this because I can't sleep if you're not coming home. So you either need to be home and follow the rules, or you need to get out because I can't function this way anymore. And so I left. It was fall of my senior year of high school, moved out on my own and dropped out of school to work full time. So by December of that year, I was in a coma from a drug overdose. December 1st, I think, is when it happened. I woke up from a coma December 2nd. And so from that space, I was like, okay, what am I going to do here? The coma for me was not traumatic. I don't remember anything. People, I hear about near-death experiences. I flatlined. I didn't see shit. I didn't hear anything, like nothing. And so when I came out of it, the only part that was traumatic for me was in waking up from the coma. My hands and my arms had been strapped down to the table because I had been convulsing, and for the life support, I had to be restrained. So when I first woke up, I started to choke because of the tubes in my mouth. And so when I went to reach to try to pull the obstruction out of my mouth and realized I couldn't move, then I panicked. That was traumatic for me because then I couldn't think of anything. My mind was blank. Everything was just a white room. My ears were ringing. That was pretty traumatic for me. And the year to follow, I had a significant amount of what I now know as a traumatic brain injury from lack of oxygen. My short-term memory was just jacked up. And so it made it really challenging. But the thing that got me to turn things and shift things away from using psychedelics and power plants and things at that point, I actually wasn't using them in excess. And I thought I was being really smart about it. The thing that was not working, I was using GHB to come down off of stimulants on a regular basis. But I always knew it was clean. I knew you had to be careful. All these things that I'm also now hearing reverberated in the community here in Austin. It's kind of made a resurgence in many spaces. And I'm hearing all the things I did then. You have to know what you're doing. It has to be pure, all those things. Well, turns out we got a bad batch. 9 of us ended up in the hospital. Wow. I'm the one that got the worst of it. I was also the smallest, by frame and all of that stuff. And so I ended up in a coma from it. And so I was just like, okay, clearly there's not a safe way to explore such a potentially dangerous substance. So what am I going to do about it? And at that point is when I found out my younger sister, who was 2 years younger than me, so she was 15, was getting into the same scene. And that was kind of the line for me, where I was like, it's one thing for me to be in this. It is not acceptable for her. And so my love for her was greater. And so I knew the only way I was going to be able to shift that was to get myself out, got myself out, did Miss Utah Teen, won, did Miss Teen USA, and my platform was substance abuse education. Wow. So I was speaking on national talk shows like Montel Williams. I was speaking to military chapters because our soldiers have a lot of substance abuse. So I got hardcore thrown into the once an addict, always an addict paradigm. After years of being in that space and having my story manipulated over and over again, context changed, voicing changed, leaving pieces out, I finally, at my last big speaking engagement, got ready to get up on stage, and it was a large gathering of military chapters. And right before I walked on stage, he said, "Don't say this, say more of this, leave this part out." And he, had a few notes for me. And in my mind, I was like, I'm not doing this anymore because people are using me. And I was making good money. Okay. I was sponsored by JetBlue. For a kid, I was already making bank, working for myself. I could fly anywhere I wanted for free. So on paper, everything should have been great. But I was just like, I'm not anybody's tool. Yeah. And so that was my last public speaking event in that capacity. And I said, I've just got to figure me out now. And so that's when I kind of took a break for 4 or 5 years, didn't touch any substances besides alcohol. I would still, certainly, I was a full-time bartender in New York after that. Certainly found maybe some
territory.
Yeah, maybe not the healthiest practices, we'll say. And so it was years, 6 years or so before I got back into psychedelics. And if it hadn't been the exact friend at the exact time, under the exact circumstances, I'd been so hardwired into fear of becoming an addict again, falling off the wagon. What would people say? Imposter syndrome. I lied to all these kids and, whatever. So that's how it got me back. And like I said, if it hadn't been the exact synchronicities that there were, I wouldn't have entered the space again. And I spent 6 years on my own personal journey. But by 26, when I got introduced to it, I reached a rock bottom for me, which was my health. I had endometriosis. I'd had an ovarian torsion, fibromyalgia, hypothyroidism, severe muscular scoliosis that was 40 degrees, arthritis in my knee. I mean, sleeping pills to go to sleep, caffeine to wake up, lots of wine to try to wind down for the day. And I would say that's kind of the standard American diet for a lot of people, Absolutely. To be honest. So it was, I was open to exploring it. So my first 6 years in psychedelics was really to deconstruct not only my pain body and some of the things around my fibromyalgia, but around my self-hate. I really didn't know the depth that I loathed myself. So that was about 7 or so years ago. So I've been in it now 13 years, and we can dive into all the nuance from there, but that's the entry point.
Wow. That is an incredible journey that you were able to traverse because, for most people in those situations, they would fall prey to that. They'd fall into victimhood and they would stay there. And especially to have such a, rise and fall of different things, the first thing that I wrote down is about health. So many people, like you were saying, that is the standard American diet, which is perfectly named SAD. That exactly
totally.
Is the standard American diet. Like, I don't know if they try to do that, but man, that is pretty funny. And, it's really interesting because I had a similar experience with my health with regards to just coffee and caffeine pills and things like that, using cannabis unconsciously to fall asleep and not really noticing, not being aware of the cycle I was in. That's one of the main things that for me, psychedelics and plant medicines have helped me with is the topic of awareness, right? And so I'm curious, like when you first had that experience when you were, I believe, 26 again, and you said it was the right time with the right person. Do you remember the exact awarenesses that were gained pertaining to your health and such? Like, was there like specific thoughts that you remember, like, oh, this is actually different than I thought? I'd love to go into that.
Absolutely.
I feel as though like that's one of the things that, especially people listening who may be experienced or not experienced, awareness is always that thing that, in my experience, every time I gain some, it's different. So like I look for it in a certain way, like, oh, I'll feel this if I gain awareness, and it's always different. So I'd love to hear your take on it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest takeaway from my first experience was the deep embedded disempowerment of the once an addict, always an addict cosmology I had been indoctrinated into. Mm-hmm. I was walking through my entire life like the boogeyman known as addiction was hiding in an alley that if I wasn't always paying attention and hyper vigilant, it was going to pop out, take me over and kidnap me back, and take me to Mordor or something. Like there was this like very boogeyman type energy on my back all the time. So in my first experience, the first thing that I realized was that I was not an addict. I had just like once upon a time, I was a baby. I don't say I'm a recovering baby. I grew up. I learned how to walk. I learned how to feed myself. I grew up. I got more tools. I got stronger. I built muscles. Like
yes.
I realized the girl who had been using substances to connect both to myself and to other people found other ways to do that. And so though I didn't need substances to do that anymore, that feeling in itself, Ryan, felt like 1,000 pounds lifted off my shoulders, because I didn't know I had this low level of fear, probably not low level, unconscious level of fear that was always present with me. So no wonder I couldn't sleep. I had a constant state of fear. And so, and at the same time, drinking like the poorest quality wines and subs, anyone that has taken Ambien, you want to talk about an altered state, y'all, like Ambien jacks you up.
Yeah.
And the thing that drew the line with me with Ambien is one day I went out to my car and I saw fast food wrappers in the back of my car, which means I drove. And that's when I was like, okay, we are done. Right. Yeah. And this is something that a doctor prescribed to me. So when I started to just look at all substances as functional or dysfunctional for what, that's when my life started to really change in that awareness. And it was to actually stop determining what was good or bad according to the social or societal constructs and look what is functional or dysfunctional for me with what I want to obtain and how do I want to get there. And so that first experience was that awareness that one, I'm not an addict. And in fact, I never was. That was something society put on me too, just like they put other things. And I allowed it, right? I gave my power away and said, okay, save me, help me, tell me what to do. And I did what people told me to do. And not for nothing, the community that comes with it and the lives I impacted, 1,000% there was benefit for people. And for the physical organism of myself, I was still trying to make up for everything I wasn't. I was trying to make up for everything I felt I'd ever done wrong since 8 years old. That had nothing to do with substances. That had nothing to do with abusing my body in that way. It had to do with the loss of that innocence, and the impact of that led me down a path of more trauma, 2 very violent rapes, one of which I ended up in the hospital for. And I really felt that God must hate me for the things to happen to me that did. 20 whatever broken bones, kicked in the face by a horse, freak accidents. Someone must hate me for me to be the receiver of so many traumatic experiences. And in getting in with this work, every single experience gave me an awareness. Every single one. Sometimes it was very subtle and nuanced, but over time put me in a totally different trajectory. I had nights so simple at times, just realizing that I might not experience pain for 4 hours and realizing, okay, if I can be pain-free for 4 hours, then it must be possible to expand that into my day-to-day life. So even little things that didn't seem like a big deal were huge. Just the application of some of those realizations may take time. So I would say all of them were huge.
Hey, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the show. I wanted to take a quick moment to let you all know that the doors are officially open for the Conscious Cannabis Collective. And as such, this is the last week you can sign up and receive all of the bonuses we're currently including. This is the last time I will be personally onboarding those of you who sign up with a complimentary one-on-one session. and you'll have the ability to get the Grow with Cannabis course for free during this limited time. For more info on how you can take advantage of this offer, head down to the show notes for this episode and secure your spot today, as we only have so many spots left and they are filling up quickly. Now back to the show. I love what you just said there about the whole 4 hours thing. You know, if you knew that if you could experience that for 4 hours, there was a place for you to essentially integrate that into your life. And that brings up a concept that a buddy of mine and I have talked about that I'm really fascinated by. And it's the concept of peak spelled P-E-A-K versus peak spelled P-E-E-K experiences, right? And this is something I see a lot in the psychedelic community and something I've gone through before, right? Where you're going from P-E-A-K experience to P-E-A-K experience over and over and over, and you're having these huge aha moments. Yet, you know, in my case, I wasn't aware of how to integrate them yet. Luckily, there was no like dangerous, situation I was in or anything, but it was more so just that I wasn't able to integrate it, and therefore I was forgetting things that I was gaining awareness of while in it. I'm curious if you see a lot of that happening right now with the rise in popularity in psychedelics happening and it taking off and everything, where people are unable to even understand what integration is, and therefore not able to integrate that experience they have with psychedelics into their daily life. Because in my opinion, that's what's one of the main tools that psychedelic, or one of the main purposes that psychedelics are meant for, is to take what you learn there and then integrate it into your daily life so you can have those PEEK experiences and really start expanding your consciousness, right? I always relate it to, if you ever played StarCraft, I imagine you probably didn't. I didn't even play it, but I used to watch my father play it. And it was like an old school computer game. And you'd have this map. You'd have like what you could see. And then around it was all black, right? And as you explored, it would slowly get light, right? And so that's how I've always made the analogy to what psychedelics do, right? Is like you start here and then you start expanding. But if you're not integrating that and actually asking yourself questions and having facilitators and, whatever methods possible, it's just going to go back to darkness. And so I'm curious if you see that happening a lot, and if it, happened with you. If so, how you went about moving through that, and what some of your favorite practices are for allowing those PEAK experiences to become PEEK experiences.
Yeah, I mean, you actually said a lot there, right? Because there's so much to deconstruct, even in something so simple. From my observation, from a facilitator perspective, I see it all the time. So we work primarily with wellness professionals, physicians, people that are in the wellness space, whether as a life coach or as a doctor. But they're in essence healers. They care. They really want to help people transform their lives, their physical health. The thing is, quite often they are high performance driven, right? And so faster, harder, more now. The more I work, the more lives I'll impact, the more money I'll make, whatever the driver is, or if all of it is driving. We call that Puma energy. We work from 3 energies of evolution: snake, Puma, and condor. Most evolutionaries and entrepreneurs are Pumas, or they're working from a Puma energy. The focus, the drive, the agility, it's powerful. These 3 energies, there's not one that's better. They are different for different times. Just like there is feminine and masculine energies that are functional for certain things, so is the case with the 3 energies of evolution. Now, when someone's a Puma energy, and that drive and that focus and the hunt and all that, it's energy fueling, right? It's powerful. When it gets wounded, though, so a trauma or an upbringing, the 2 most common backgrounds of a Puma is either the father gave significance and love for high achievement or winning, whether competitive or academia, or the father was emotionally absent, which could be physically or alcoholism, something like that, but not there. Doesn't mean the mother never has anything to do with it. That is simply 8 out of 10 of about 1,200 now entrepreneurs we've worked with. Those were the 2 most common backgrounds, 8 out of 10 times. So when a Puma is wounded, it still has that drive, but there's a hypervigilance and they can't relax, and their claws are always drawn. They're more likely to attack. That hunt, that fear never stops. And so what we have found is when that comes into the psychedelic space for exploration, then it's okay. So I just need to do rapé every single day so that I can connect in. And then I'm going to do, it usually goes, they took Adderall in college, kratom in their late 20s, rapé by the time they hit their 30s. Yep. It's this sequence. Pumas love their energy. Okay. Yeah. And so Then when they come into the psychedelic space, the harder, faster, more now can assign to the psychedelic space. So it's either I want to go high dose as fast as possible, or I'm going to go to the jungle for a month so that I could just get it all done and move on with my life. Mm-hmm. So through these processes, quite often it's like, cool, I'm going to go into a journey hard this weekend, and then they're back to work on Monday. There is no space to reevaluate and reorient. How does my life need to shift and align to create space for the new awareness? So that integration process, most people don't actually, when I ask them, what do you do to integrate? Very few people can give me tangible, tactical answers. I mean, that was the whole reason why we created the Psychedelic Space program. Well, one of maybe 2 or 3 core things was, one, people would maybe journal, but they didn't know how to quantify or track or actually integrate the realizations. So if you're not checking in on a daily basis with the awareness you received, it starts to shift back into the unconscious again. And it doesn't mean you won't still grow or shift over time, but without a conscious, intentional application of what you know, it doesn't become an embodiment of what you know. It becomes a knowledge versus a wisdom. And that's the difference of having an aha moment of like, oh man, I get it. So the long answer to the question is, I see it all of the time. And the body's been patterned into operating from that space. So if someone comes into a psychedelic space in that Puma energy, their desire is to go to ayahuasca or go to what they perceive is the answer or the biggest, let me just go jump out of the plane, when really what their nervous system and their physicality truly is craving is to slow down. But that is terrifying for like a Puma that is wounded, that it's like, no, if I slow down, I die. Can't do that. Terrible. So to pause their life to integrate feels like slowing down, but it's looking at the signs of the body: adrenal fatigue, weird allergies, high inflammation. We see it play out over and over again. Your mind may be satiated by the psychedelic experience. Your body is still not, it's still not being considered. So for integration, it also takes, what is your breath work? What does your slow down look like? If anyone's into like F1 racing or, high powered cars, the brake is as important as the gas. And most entrepreneurs have learned how to pump the brake so they don't go into the wall. But their idea of resting is like hitting the pit when they blew a tire. The car might be stopped, but the engine's still running. It's not relaxed. Without relaxation, you can't integrate. You can't create space for the new possibilities. And if you can't fully relax, the body cannot recover.
I love that. And, I speak from experience on that. That has definitely been something I have experienced in the past for sure. And I think I speak for many Pumas out there where it's like, what do you mean? I schedule in an hour of slowdown every day. That's perfect. And it's like, well, first of all, relaxation shouldn't be scheduled necessarily on your calendar unless you're taking a week off or something like that. But even then, I found it challenging in the past few years until I started to really do a lot of self-development work to slow down and have my mind actually be at ease with being slowed down, and in a way, I mean, it's really just an addiction of a different sort, right? So instead of using a drug, you're addicted to doing things, right? Because that's how you find fulfillment for one reason or another. I'm curious because I imagine in that situation, like we were talking about, the fear of someone in that Puma energy that is wounded is that if they slow down, how are things going to get done? What is their life worth? What are they doing for their purpose, et cetera, right? Especially now with the degrees of those 3 different, personality patterns you can fall into. What do you find some of the common fears are? I find that with a lot of clients I work with, I'm starting to find very similar fears with certain people. Like I can tell a very grounded person might have a certain fear, whereas someone who I would consider a very extroverted or Puma energy, in your words, is going to have like this common fear of like, if I slow down, the world is going to end. If I say no to someone, the world is going to end. I have to yes everyone to death and do everything all the time, all the things. And so I'm curious what some common fears are, because I feel for those listening, they might be able to go, oh, that sounds like me. And I think that might be a really nice thing for them to hear.
Yeah. I mean, some of the fears, even if someone knows they're driven by some of the trauma and experiences, the fear is, if I remove what's driving this bus, Will I still be successful? And so for some people, they're like, my fear is that if I actually get resolve around this, when that's what's been driving me and motivating me to be successful, do I just lose a sense of purpose because then I'm content doing nothing? And they don't even want to consider that because they still love what they do, right? The way that it feeds them, or the contribution, or they really do care about people. So one of the fears is that if I really slow down to feel everything I need to feel, will it impact how I serve and how I can contribute? Because my hypervigilance and my, nose to the grindstone, hard work, not only do people respect and admire that about me, but also if I lose that, will I, in essence, lose my purpose, my passion? So there's that. One of the other fears is if I slow down to feel, what if it doesn't stop? For people that have had very deep experiences, maybe they lost someone, there's some bereavement, or they feel like I've already mourned that. It's time to move on. So there's fears that if they slow down, that there's going to be some wave that crashes over them that they won't recover from, because they still kind of are operating like they're running out of time. To slow down takes more time. So if they saw a parent die young, if they saw parents degrade with age, now they're hitting 40, they're like, oh my gosh, I've really only got like 15 or 20 years and I'm just now getting a handle on it. All of these fears, it's like if I slow down, people are really afraid to know what they know. Maybe they're in a relationship that subconsciously they know they don't really want to be in, and they're not ready to confront that. They may be in a job like that. They may have kids that honestly, they have moments that they feel like, not that they regret being a parent, but they have moments they wish they weren't a parent. Some of those truths are so confronting, and it doesn't mean that you'd get rid of your kid or leave your spouse or anything, but the slowing down to consider it is terrifying for a lot of people. So those are probably some of the main ones, or maybe they've been in a religion that if they slow down and really question their feelings, will their family reject them? Maybe they're not heterosexual. Maybe they are, maybe there just might be some truth underneath that is scary for them to actually slow down and know what they know.
Yeah, I love that. And it's so important too, because one of the things that I've been really focused on recently is, really asking a lot of people what their tips are, right? Because for a lot of people right now, they're just starting using psychedelics, right? They see all the popularity and they think this is definitely for me. I should 100% do this because one of the things that I find in common articles is basically either psychedelics are amazing, everyone should do all of them all the time, or don't do it once, it's the devil, right? There's really no middle ground. And that's one of the main reasons I started this podcast, right? Because I'm a big psychedelic proponent, and also I'm aware that they're not for everyone, right? And so for those considering psychedelics that may be listening, like what are some tips that you would give that you wish maybe you had gotten when you were first introduced to psychedelics that would have allowed you to have just a better awareness over like what could potentially happen and what is considered quote unquote normal in this expanded consciousness realm?
I mean, the most important thing is not to give your power away to any mentor, to any substance, to any person, to any religion, to any truth. And no matter what it is that gets presented to you from a facilitator, from a plant, really recognizing that your individual power is all that you actually have. And in doing this work, it's really about trusting yourself. And I'm grateful that I was put in alignment with really integral facilitators of all kinds, shaman, ayahuasqueros, curanderas, like of all over the world. And I've had a lot of people come to me that weren't so lucky. And so even if someone comes highly recommended, question everything. I actually created something called Finding Your Facilitator. It's like a facilitator questionnaire. If you text my name, Kole, Kole, to 22999, you can get the download of it. I recommend every facilitator you ever work with, every coach, every therapist, that you go through this questionnaire, because in that questionnaire, in fact, I could actually pull up a few things from it. But one of the things is like, where did they get their training from? How do they handle trauma? Are you going to be in a group? Because if you're a very empathic person and you end up going to a larger group, you could spend the entire time feeling in tremendous chaos because there's so much going on in the room that you're picking up. And so then can make it even more chaotic for the individual to experience, and not knowing what's yours and what's theirs. So if you already know you're very empathic, I recommend starting in a small group where you can get a little bit of space between yourself and the other people. Because when I hear of, and I have people come back from some of these experiences where there's 50 plus people in a room, a lot of times they come back and they don't really know what to integrate because they were perceiving everything around them. So asking someone, how long have you been a facilitator, right? How many ceremonies have you approximately conducted at this point? That doesn't make someone better. The point of these questions is so that you can listen and feel and listen with your body. What is your body telling you with the answers that you're hearing? So it could be things like, how do they conduct the ceremony? What's the duration of the ceremony? Knowing what's included in the experiences. Like, I didn't know any of these things. Are you going to support me if I have questions after about integration, and for how long? Someone might say, yep, the first week I support you. After that, you have to pay, which I understand. It's extended support, right? What sort of diet do they recommend leading up to it, and why? I spent a tremendous amount. When someone tells me, well, because that's the way it's done, it's not my person. Okay. Yeah. When they say, look, in this tradition, here's what they believe and here's why, then you're taking the time to satiate my mind so I can feel safe. So it's not about someone giving me the answers that I want. It's someone giving me the time that is required for me to feel safe. And if for any reason you don't feel safe, if you're sitting in the circle and any part of your body is like, no, it is a no. Pack up your shit, put it in the car and leave. Even if you went all the way to Peru, even if you went all the way to Costa Rica, listen to your body, because only in retrospect will you understand why. And I've had journeys that I thought it was a yes. And then I got there because I was just shaming myself. Like, it's just because I'm afraid. It's something wrong with me. I need to push through. And with the times that Yep. Yeah. And the times that I did that, I spent the whole journey saying, why didn't I listen to myself? This felt like a no. I did it anyway. It still taught me a valuable lesson, right? So it still wasn't bad. But maybe there was someone there dealing with a heavy energy, that I was in such a sensitive space that my body was not in a position to hold space for myself to protect my energy from someone else's process. So now if any part of my organism says no, it is a no. And if it was it was fear that held me back, I'll learn that and I'll push it a little more the next time. But being gentle and slow with yourself versus the harder, faster, more now, I'm grateful I did honor that a lot through this process for me. But I would say if I could share it with more people to really understand that, you're surrounded by psychedelic facilitators, whether you know it or not. So any opportunity presented to you is not the only one, I assure you. Even if you feel like this is your only chance, it's not.
Yeah, especially in today's world. And I'm glad you brought that up, because, I've been seeing a epidemic of sorts of people that go to Burning Man once and then all of a sudden are now a shaman, and especially using the term shaman, that is like a red flag for me right away. It doesn't always mean anything necessarily, but it's like, okay, I definitely want to ask more questions, because they're using that terminology rather than facilitator. And I'm really glad you brought up, the topic of being an empath, because I feel as though many people, especially those just starting out, are not aware or might not be aware if they are an empath or not, right? And so they might sign up for one of these bigger journeys and then have all of this other energy coming into them, and they don't even understand how to verbalize that, right? And so I'm curious, like, what would be some signs that you might, like, if someone came to you and they said, hey, Kole, I'm not sure if I'm an empath, and I'm not sure if it'd be better to be in a group facilitation or maybe a one-on-one. What are some signs that I should look for to tell me in my body if I'm not used to feeling yet? Maybe I'm still getting used to like the topic of feeling my feelings. What might be some signs that you would say, hey, you know what, maybe you should do a one-on-one instead of a group facilitation?
No. I mean, the short answer is everyone is an empath. It's, are they attuned to what physical manifestations of their environment they're used to? And the sensitivity varies. Now, for me, the more connected I got to my body, the more my empathy turned up. So I had to develop ways to be really mindful of where I put my energy at what times. If I'm towards my cycle or in certain parts of my cycle where I'm more sensitive, I'm more protective of my energy because it's more in an absorbent phase just in my environment. So the signs that I tell someone to look for is that first I'll ask, what is their overall experience of their body right now, right? Migraines, headaches, physical pains, all this stuff. For me, versus looking at signs, my question is, what is the onboard process of the facilitator you're talking to? Because building safety and knowing who you're putting in a room together is where that starts. So yes, the individual sovereignty, but part of what I do is almost like a chakra mapping with someone first, a body mapping. We go through all of their surgical history, injuries, even if it didn't create a scar, but if they stand out, how they were raised, all of this stuff. If someone still has physical manifestations in their body, I want to know where those could potentially be coming from. So if you often get headaches at work, if every time you go to visit your parents, you get sick to your stomach, if every time you go to a certain friend's house, it's like these little physical manifestations that are clear in environment, like in certain environments. So I'll tell someone, like, it's a longer conversation of self-discovery, of asking, they're like, oh, I've got frozen shoulder or something. And I'll be like, well, when did that start? What's going on in your life? Well, my dad's been sick and I haven't been able to help, right? Reaching out to give, like to be there, to really offer, and to get things done. And so if they're picking up from their father in that kind of way, then I'm going to be mindful, or the conversation we could have is around father dynamics, because certain facilitators reflect certain parts of you and the people in the room reflect certain parts of you. So the intentionality of where you place your body matters, because let's say I know a woman has a lot of trauma with a man, then her going to a male facilitator could turn up not only her empathy of like her protective mechanisms, but any shame dynamics or other things. So it's a really long, broad conversation for someone to identify if they're empathic. But overall, it's like, how do you feel in a room full of people, right? Like, do you like going to parties? If you don't like going to parties because the energy is too much, group setting is probably not the place to start. Because you're not just going to have the 12 people in the room. You're going to have them, their ancestors, whoever else they call in, those energies too. And a room can get very crowded very fast, depending on how a facilitator or a shaman works, or how much space you have within the container. So if you're very sensitive to crowds, right, or a lot of people, or certain types of people don't function for you, those would be the first signs for me. Like, how is that in your external environment right now? If you really get triggered by certain types of people, you will almost certainly attract one of those into one of your ceremonies for you to work with it, which is fine. That's when I would start with smaller groups or one-on-one, so that you can really get anchored into what your shit is, so that if you get placed into a container, you already are clear in what's yours, and it's easier to kind of keep everyone else's outside of you. But until you know what's yours, you can pick up everybody else's. So that was a bit of a rant and a ramble, but hopefully it brings
that's
some
amazing.
Connections.
And I love your insights on this, because you have so much information pertaining to all of your wisdom and all of your experience. And, one of the things that came to mind immediately was the whole concept of too many cooks in the kitchen, right? Like, I have definitely had many instances like that, especially like considering that ground zero for a lot of people's first time with psychedelics is music festivals. And you want to talk about some strange energy, man, that can get really real quick. And one of the subjects I'm really excited to dive into with you is mental health, right? Because this is one of the things that so much of the research that's coming out is validating, which is what a lot of users have been reporting for years. I mean, I know for me, psilocybin helped tremendously with my anxiety and moving into that, understanding the causes behind it and what was triggering it, right? I'd love if you could talk a little bit about specifically trauma, because this is one of the things that I've been really focusing on in my own life. And also, I have been around with a lot of people that have been using psychedelics with facilitators and becoming aware of some trauma and being able to remove that. And so it's one of those like almost charged terms like trauma, right? Like what is trauma? And
Mm-hmm.
so, and also how do psychedelics actually help it? Because for so many people, they now see the studies and so they can't necessarily refute it, but it doesn't really make them a quote unquote believer, right? And not necessarily that everyone needs to be a believer, but I do feel that many people are thoroughly just looking for the information. And some of it is so wordy out there. And also some things contradict that I'd be very interested to hear like what your take is on how psychedelics can help with trauma.
Sure. So, the thing with psychedelics and trauma, first, the way that my friend Will Reason, who's a somatic experiencing practitioner,
Mm.
which is also an amazing place for people to start before they go into psychedelics, is to really work with an SV practitioner first. Because the definition he gave me, which has been what I've carried ever since he said it, was trauma is too much too fast or too little for too long. That is what trauma is. Too much too fast is a car accident. Too little for too long is parents that weren't home, or, you had a bunch of kids in your family and you were kind of in the middle. So there was a lack of nurturing or, whatever. And so when I look through that lens of trauma and trauma resolution, a lot of people talk about, well, I need to get rid of this trauma and let go of these experiences. For me, I actually look to integrate and pull them in, not push them out. Because the thing is, all of them come with certainly really traumatic aspects. They also come with a lot of gifts too. And if we just look to remove and let go, we kind of can release everything. And so when it comes to trauma work in psychedelics, some of the most powerful practitioners I know are either former dominatrix who have gone into now this shamanatrix energy work type thing where they're taking everything they learned. Yeah, that's my thing. Love it. They've taken all their knowing of the shadow of humanity, but now through their own personal experiences are understanding trauma resolution. Because actually many DOMs that work from a conscious space are some of the most powerful healers you will ever meet because of the vulnerability and parts of a person they've seen. And so as they get into trauma work with an individual using things like shibari or ropes for journeying into the self before there's ever a psychedelic, really guiding the person into themselves in a way that's safe, in a way that's contained, in a way that's consensual, and doing it slow, helps the body prepare for other altered states. Mm. So if someone's afraid, or if someone's had a substance abuse history, looking at what other somatic applications or ways to get altered states that are short half-life. So what I mean by that is something like LSD can be 12, 16 hours, right? Something like psilocybin can be like 4 to 6. So when you start with something, say like a shibari session with like one of the women I work with, Rena Trevi, if you were to work with Rena, it's a 3-hour session, but you are very present and it's about going slow first, building that intimacy with yourself so that once you get into an altered state, you've already created anchors of safety. You can do that with breath work. You can do that with yoga. You can do that with sound healing, whatever resonates for you, in preparation for other altered states. The propensity is if someone is coming to psychedelics for trauma or anxiety or depression, they want it to be over. They want the answer now. And not that can't happen. It can, but it depends on what's causing the depression and the anxiety. It's not just depression, take this much MDMA equals healed. That's not how it works. It's what caused the dysfunction, what caused the disconnect, what will cause the person feeling complete and whole. So it's a beautiful opportunity for people to see themselves. That can also be really confronting and scary for people. So I believe everyone can work with psychedelics. I do not believe everyone should, and I use should lightly, be consuming them through their mouth. What I mean by this is, all of us that have done this deep exploration, every person that I show up for and with and hold space for and reflect the lessons I've learned, I am the medicine in articulation. I am the psychedelic experience that they are now a part of. So for me, everyone is a part of my psychedelic experience. If we come in contact in any capacity, you are already experiencing some part of it. But if someone is looking to go into it, to consume it, and to look, knowing the contraindications of their medications, knowing who they're working with, and also if a person, the most important thing for me, if someone's going to do this work and they have PTSD or very strong trauma responses, is that they have community support of some kind. So whether that's a skilled therapist for ongoing integration practices, a close friend they can be very vulnerable with. The issues that I see is if someone comes into this work, they get that expanded space, they expand their consciousness, but then they go back to a dangerous or an environment that is not supportive of the new version of them or the version they are looking to actualize. And so it is the home environment that has more to do with it, from my belief, than the substance or what caused their trauma. It's what systems do they have currently for support, so that as they realize, as they actualize, as they build awareness, who do they have to talk to? Most communities, when you look at like when they've got people that live over 100 years old, they had strong community, not what they ate, not what they didn't eat. It's their stress levels, their feeling of acceptance and love and connection. So regardless of why someone feels called to be there to do this work as a facilitator, my number one is also looking at, well, safety is my number one priority. What is their current environment? Is it conducive to healing? Do they have a space for the healing to take place after the experience?
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I feel as though that is a subject that is not talked about nearly enough, which is community, right? And especially with the year we just had, and a lot of people now like rushing to get into a lot of psychedelics, which is something I've seen, and especially like feeling a big lack of community for many of them, And with regards to what we were talking about those experiences, those somatic experiences that you can get into prior to doing psychedelics, the way I thought about it is when you learn to ride a bike, you don't just hop on a bike and ride it. You have training wheels first, right? And those wheels are meant to allow you to get used to what that bike feels like, so that when they're off, you have a sense of what the balance is going to feel like. And so that was really the analogy I thought of immediately when you used that. And I love that. And, to talk about facilitators, with so many people looking to get into this type of work, and you being one of the ones who actually can train people to get into this, I'm curious what process you went through to want to train people, right? Because in order to do that, it's first of all a lot of work, but also it had to have been a passion that had started at one point. And so with, Tahkole, with everything you have going, I'm really curious, what was the path that led you to getting into that type of work? And what has been the most rewarding aspect of teaching people how to do this properly and responsibly and consciously thus far?
Yeah, I mean, just like I never anticipated becoming a facilitator, when I got into this work, it was the first time in my life I said, this is about me. This is about my journey. I have healing to do. And so it wasn't until about 5 years into my own journey, people started asking if I would facilitate them or hold space for them, we'll say. Because I identify a few different ways you can be a facilitator. Facilitator means to make easy, right? Mm-hmm. To make something easy. Mm-hmm. So at first, people would ask me if I just hold space for them because they wanted to do it on their own, but they didn't feel safe to be alone. They were like, I'll do it. You don't need to touch any of the substance or bring it. I just don't want to be by myself. And so will you be there? And even that for me initially was a no. I said, look, until it's a yes, it's a no for me. That was that self-trust that I had developed. If I have any reservations or concerns, then it's a no, because this is me too. And so just like through that, then I was shown it's time. And as I spoke to one of my mentors in Peru, I said, I'm feeling, called now in particular to facilitate Wachuma, or a lot of people know as San Pedro, but I don't think I've studied it long enough. And he said it so sweetly. He was like, I was like, how will I know that I've trained enough? And he said, to trust the plants to give you the truth and then question when they say you're ready that's not how this works.
Yeah.
For some people, they may never get the message that it's time. For others, they may feel it's time now. For me, when it came to one, I felt a lot safer because Ta has been an emergency medicine nurse for 28 years. Well, 23 was in emergency rooms in New York City. Talk about someone that's like battle tested of trauma. He is. So that was a huge support for me medically to have that. So that was huge. But then in getting to the facilitation, because Ta's a nurse, the note taking, the questions, the onboarding, the triage basically of people's life experience taught me so much about people. And it developed a process for us that we have not seen anywhere else. And it doesn't make ours better, it makes it different. And now that we've experienced and done it so many ways in this way, we find much more lasting transformations as a result, because we talk about creating your life team and building community. And everything we've done has been around building community so people aren't reliant on us. I am not a guru. I am not a shaman. I'm starting to actually be open to maybe I do work with energy and stuff too, but I'm still in process. So I will not own it yet. But for me, when it came to shifting into training other facilitators, it was honestly, people have been asking us for years, and we've mentored a couple people, but we're talking about a couple. And then the only time I journey now is if it comes to me in a dream. I got a clear message in one of my experiences that there's nothing else for me out there, that anything else that I go to explore just on my own is as a tourist. There's not anything for me to do. My work is here in the third dimension, in the here and the now. And so get your boots on. We got work to do. Like, let's go. And so I was like, okay, right. It's been 13 years. It's not like I didn't do some exploring in my time. And so I owned that and I'd only journeyed like twice last year. And I got a dream about 3 months ago that it was 2 nights in a row. Whoever they are, I have no idea who they are, but they talk to me in dreams, and not very often. So when it comes, it's very clear and it's very direct. And I was told I needed to do 10 grams of mushrooms, B+, showed me where I needed to lay, how to set up my crystals, what needed to happen. And it needed to happen soon, that there was something that my body needed. And mind you, I've done all this body work in releasing pain and all this stuff. So if I get messages about my body, I know it's quite serious. So they said, there's something that your body needs, and there's something we need to show you for this next phase of your life. So I was like, oh, but 10 though? That's so much. It's a daunting amount. And that's a whole other conversation, high dose versus standard therapeutic doses. It's high dose for me. It's high dose for many. And so I did. And one of the messages that came through was that it was time for us to step out from behind the altar, out from behind the mesa of sorts, and out of the underground to teach, which means that was scary too, because there goes my income as far as like running groups and stuff or privates, because now if I step forward, what does that mean? Right? That could put me in danger or whatever. But it doesn't matter. When something in my body is a yes, and I am certain and it is clear, I do as my body and my heart compels. And so that's when the Psychedelic Space program started. It was like, no, it's time. Right now, people are hearing the call and they're looking for someone to help guide them, teach them, show them, because they want to be intentional, because they are guided by integrity. They want to know, but they don't know where to turn. There's a lot of information, but it's kind of fractured and all over the place. And so I was just like, really? Okay. I'm on Clubhouse a lot. For anyone that hasn't been on Clubhouse, I live on that. And the psychedelic conversations, it's so good. The psychedelic conversations, there's nowhere else on the planet or in an app of people having such deep conversations around it. And I started talking about it in some of the rooms. I had 20 people reached out to me that wanted to do this training before I even had an email or a sales page or a sign up or anything. And I was like, okay, here we go. And all I did was share what was in my experience, which if you're hearing the call, to be a part of this movement. You just don't know how. Maybe you're new to it. So you're like, what do I know? But I'm still feeling this pull that I don't understand. Or facilitators that have been doing it for years, but they're still financially broke. And one of my messages has been, ain't nothing woke about being broke. And part of our healing now is also financial abundance, and not just manifesting love or articulations of money and gifts, but actually learning the skill of money for healers and building it on a business that is financially contribution driven. It gives back, but how to build an infrastructure so that the facilitator is taking care of their body. Your body as a facilitator directly impacts your client experience. That doesn't mean your body has to be in perfect shape. You have to know what is your shit and how to contain it within your own organism so it doesn't leak out onto people, because it does. Mm-hmm. If you had a bad day, rough time, challenges are coming up, you have to know how to zip that shit up for a session. You do, because otherwise it becomes a part of their experience. And so all of these conversations I was having on Clubhouse, because of all my experience, and I've worked with tons of different facilitators, lots of different plants and fungi, I had a lot of perspective to share. And that's all I'm doing, is sharing my experience and my perspective. And so people were like, yes, please tell me what you know, because it'll help me discern. It will help me decide how to build this in a way that's sustainable, because I honestly believe that we can't just have a bunch of white people going around being healers. Yes. Each person needs someone within their communities. And most of the shamanic space, as I see it, is very white, heteronormative. There's nothing wrong with that, but everyone needs a space for their healing where they feel seen and validated at different reasons for different times. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I was like, well, in that case, we need more facilitators. And I had to let go of all my self-righteous cosmologies around what's right and what training you should go through. What did people do hundreds of years ago? There was no trainer. Maybe there was a mentor, right? Maybe there's someone with rituals and you build and you grow in that way. Once upon a time, though, as humans, we also didn't have that. You had, Phil McCracken sitting outside, wandering through the woods, who ate a mushroom and discovered a bunch of stuff, and the plants showed him. And so for me, it's been a practice of surrendering to the messages and also learning to let go, to trust these plants and these spirits and educate. Mm-hmm. Just like with sex in teens, if we actually educated versus this idea of abstinence, we would have less diseases, less teen pregnancies, because people would have information. Mm-hmm. So for me, that's been my thing is, my friend Aaron Lohman Jack says, you can't be a lighthouse if you can't keep the lights on. And as a facility, I'm not out educating, then people will do the best that they can with the information that they find, which I have been watching is not garnering the results that I perceive I can teach. And so now it feels I am here to ensure not only accessibility for communities, but also ensuring it is sustainable, what plants and fungi and animal medicines are being depleted, and what we need to be mindful of as we continue forward in this work, as more people come to this work. Understanding those things is the only way we're actually bringing awareness. And so for me, this is a daily practice of awareness. Only now it's coming to facilitators, answering their questions, being present for them so they can serve. There's amazing communities that have leaders that want to be able to support the people in their community, which means for me, having really powerful facilitators for every community is what it's going to take. And not having it be such a wild, wild west that someone has one experience, then they think they can heal anyone. I've seen trauma be developed because of white male facilitators over Black women, where their body, their epigenetic traumas show. And these are things that once you hear it as a facilitator, you can discern. And someone may still decide to work with you don't feel equipped for, but it's a conversation. It's a level of transparency and honesty and love and support that if you start by operating from that space, you will create a container of far more impactful evolutions and transformations as a result. So for me, it's bringing the awareness from the beginning so people can craft and create and support in the ways that their heart feels so compelled to.
That was beautifully said. And, really what I saw there too was how back in, ancient times, we'll say, we had wise elders, right? People that would pass these traditions down, right? Would pass down what the plants and animals taught them. And we have a lot of elders these days, but not too many wise elders, right? As they would fit in back then. And so really what I see you doing is being the wise elder that's training new wise elders, right? People that are stepping up. And really what I see happening as a collective is humans going back to human beings, not human doings, right? To talk about that Puma energy again. And so looking ahead now, now that we've discussed a lot of different aspects of psychedelics, and, we've briefly touched on the research coming out pertaining to mental health and all the different facets that psychedelics are being researched for, what excites you most about looking forward into 2021 and beyond with regards to psychedelics, the research coming out, the stigma being reversed, being able to create these wise elders again in the communities of human beings? What excites you most?
I mean, I honestly get a bit teary-eyed when I think about it, because every Tuesday night I do a call with anyone signed up for the program.
Mm.
And every week people are just reflecting the same thing over and over again. And it's just like, I want to serve. And I feel the call, and I don't know what it looks like, but I'm excited. Like, people are excited for this possibility. And for me, it's like I'm finally seeing the hope that I've felt in my heart. Like, I'm seeing this fruition, where my whole life I felt like I had some very strong mission, that it feels now like I'm stepping into what I was put on this earth to do. And for me, the excitement comes from other people seeing that too, of what their space is right now and their self-trust. And I can see the work they've done on themselves to trust themselves. Like, that excites me to no end, because we've got about 2 years before this becomes more mainstream. And my goal is to have so many people educated that by the time big pharma and these bigger industries are releasing education, we've got enough underground to meet that. I'm not trying to overtake or take down or anything those other infrastructures. I want to increase the information available through the ground, through like the mycelial network that is underneath, like percolating and growing. And so for me, that's exciting, because it's just like right now, this movement is sporing across the world. And to me, there's no greater excitement of what's possible the more people become aware. And if they do it through MDMA therapy, beautiful. If they don't do it through, psilocybin, beautiful. At the end of the day, I would love people to increase their awareness, to start growing their own and understanding how to raise these things as if it's a child or a pet or something they truly love. And I think that awareness of how people treat each other, their kids, whatever it is, for me, I feel like I'm finally seeing the possibility I've always carried in my heart.
Once again was beautifully said. And, I find a lot of resonance with regards to how I felt specifically about cannabis for years. I've been a grower for over 10 years and have been in the industry. I was in the industry for a few years, and it got very interesting at certain times, because most people are not concerned with, especially the people running these businesses, over how they're producing the medicine, what the energy of the people producing this medicine are doing, what in terms of the medium they're producing this medicine with is. And so I've always been preaching conscious consumption. And, I really saw a big change from the first year I was there to the last 3 years, where people really started, coming in and saying, like, this medicine used to work better for me, and I'm really not knowing why it's not working better. And I feel very scared to talk about it with my friends, because they're going to judge me. They're going to do this, that. And it felt so amazing to be able to be trusted in that way, And so I do see a big coming of age with regards to increasing the level of consciousness and the level of awareness that humans have around these medicines.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a beautiful time to be alive. And I was just saying today, I do my 5 minutes of gratitude popcorn every morning. And one of them was just, I'm so grateful to be alive in such an amazing time in history.
Yes.
We're in the germination phase, to put it in plant growth, and to be able to help facilitate that plant to grow into a beautiful, beautiful tree is just such an incredible gift. And I'm so grateful to be able to have people like you in the world that are preaching and being able to teach and spread this knowledge and spread this wisdom, because it's needed now more than ever. I mean, especially with the year that people just went through, people are aware that the old paradigm is not working anymore, and they're searching, they're seeking, right? And to have people like yourself out there that are ready to catch them as they're quote unquote falling is so impactful, because for many people, the old structure had to fall to a certain degree to allow something new in. Space needed to be created, right? And the last year gave a lot of people a lot of time, right? And what is the most valuable resource? It is time. So I think people are much more aware now that time is finite. What are you going to do with it? So, Kole, this is so amazing getting to talk with you and share your wisdom, your knowledge, your insights with all the listeners. Where can I send people to connect with you, work with you, and just learn from you?
Sure. I mean, the fastest way is if you're in the United States to text Kole to 22999. That gives you all my contact info, gives you the download, gives you the link to the podcast. Like it shoots you a couple links, but that's the fastest. And then so I have 2 different podcasts. One is Mentor in the Mirror. That's around the concepts I've learned in all these journeys, whether around shame or family constructs or, those kinds of things. That's more conceptually. Then there's the Psychedelic Space, which is the conversations from Clubhouse with different perspectives and people talking specifically around psychedelics. So that podcast is more, because like you were talking about earlier, the conversation of psychedelics was starting to take over the other podcast. And not that that was a problem, but we wanted to just separate their two. We wanted them both to have their stages of sorts. So you can reach me there. And then, on Instagram, I'm Mr. Kole, Kole. On Clubhouse, I'm at Psychedelic. You can pretty much throw a stone and find me at this point. Now that I've come out of the closet, now I feel like it's pretty easy to find me if you want to. Our training's in Austin, Texas, May 7th to the 9th, if someone hears this by then. And that's in person or hybrid for those that can't travel because of restrictions right now or because of their own health. But this is going to be an ongoing thing. It's time. And so for anyone that's been hearing the call, I'm excited to hold space for you to figure out what that looks like for you. Do you want to be a trip sitter? Do you want to be a Sherpa, which is you actually take the journey? Do you want to never touch a substance, but be an integration coach? We're going to teach our process of journaling and actually create it where we hand you everything that you just personalize it. It's basically our system we've used. So there's lots of options to get involved, and hit me up. I'm available. I'm around.
That's amazing. And, I have one more question for you if you're up for it, Kole. What do you say?
Always.
All right, cool. So if someone listening was just swayed by you to experience psychedelic medicine for the first time, what piece of advice would you offer them to give them the best opportunity to have the smoothest and most rewarding experience possible?
I would say to write a love letter to this plant or fungi you're looking to experience, or ayahuasca, mushrooms, wachuma, and ask them almost like you were looking to this future lover that you're going to share an experience with, and start building the relationship with that spirit now, with that teacher. For me, I don't go to plants as medicine or fungi. I go to them as mentors and teachers. And by going that way, I'm also taking responsibility for the lessons and what they show me. And so if you were looking at this teacher or mentor, write them a letter. What would you like them to show you? What would you like to learn about yourself or the universe or the world? And after writing that letter, fold it up and place it on an altar or a location in your house with a candle, and spend 2 minutes every day reading that letter. Maybe you write another letter over time. And if you're looking for a facilitator, ask for it. Ask to be shown who your mentor, your guide, or your teacher is. That is already weaving the container and creating the safe space that you are meant for, that you're meant to be in. And then you'll hear and you'll feel and you'll recognize when that opportunity comes. So the more intention you put in now, before you even get there, will actualize in your life. That doesn't mean in the experience itself you have the biggest experience possible. It means that intention will be reflected in your life and the realizations as a result. So don't wait. The journey's already begun. Just set the intention and it will come in perfect time.
I love that. All right, guys. So when I was turned on to Kole by a mutual friend, I was immediately intrigued, as she quite literally is into every single subject that fascinates me. After digging more into her background and discovering what a wealth of knowledge she was in the realms of psychedelics, conscious consumption, consciousness, among many other things, I was beyond excited to have the opportunity to get her on the show to share her wisdom and her knowledge with all of you and me as well. Kole has a broad range of services she offers, such as the ones we chatted about here, and trust me when I say that what we chatted about today only skims the surface of who Kole Whitty is. If you have been interested in optimizing your physical health, becoming a plant medicine facilitator, or unlocking trauma stored inside of your body in order to play full out at life, then waste no time in reaching out to Kole to begin adding more fun, power, and color to your life. And on the topic of adding fun to our lives, this podcast is a very new project for me, and to say I am having an absolute blast with it would be an understatement. It would mean so much to me if everyone listening could share this show with those you love and leave reviews on iTunes, as every single person helps to expand the knowledge spoken from the guests on this show into the world, which I am eternally grateful for. Kole, thank you so much once again for sharing your time with us today, and until next time, may your journey be smooth and exciting. Much love.